Hello and welcome back to BS Rugby. The Six Nations is just days away now and the excitement is certainly building. I cannot wait. Here is my preview alongside Dara from the fantastic Overlap Rugby podcast. Looking forward to the Six Nations from an Irish perspective. How is this Ireland team going to do after the success of the Autumn Nations series? Who are the players to keep an eye out on from the squad and how will they get on? As always, if you do enjoy, please do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Lots of content coming out in the lead up to the Six Nations. There's already a preview out for England and for Scotland on the channel, so make sure to check them out. And if you'd like to listen to the audio version of this, it is linked down below. The audio versions are released earlier than the video one, so make sure to follow me on your audio platform. Anyway, enjoy the pod. Big shout out to Dara from the Overlap Rugby podcast for jumping on, and I hope you enjoy the video. Let's start then by having a look at last year's Six Nations for you guys. Not the greatest year, some ups and downs along the way. A first game of the tournament was against us boys, and I don't want to bring too many memories back from that day, but Louis Rees-Zammit, I'm sure, got a try in that one. If I remember correctly, Wales winning that 21-16, but then losing at home to France in a bit of a dead game, really. It wasn't anything special, 15-13. But then beating Italy like many teams did across the tournament, then beating Scotland up in Murrayfield before then thrashing England. Looking back at the competition, very up and down for you guys. How do you think the perception of the tournament, of the campaign, was in Ireland?
At the time, it was kind of mixed. Everything was up in the air. Obviously, knowing what we know now, there's a feeling of positivity that we were building as we went along. The headline for me coming out of that tournament was that if you looked at the games themselves, in every one of those games, Ireland dominated the forward battle, including against the French. Like, they owned all of the stats, possession, territory. They were winning collisions. They had huge periods of play in the opposition half, going hammer and tongs at it, and just weren't able to convert. There were offensive issues. They were still a little slow, little sluggish. Murray was at the helm at 9. They were struggling to set their own tempo, but at set piece and at ruck time and in the contact areas, the forward pack were winning battles. And that was true of the game against Wales that they lost. That was true of the game against France that they lost. They were caught in those two games for having a sluggish offense and probably a slightly leaky defense. But then to finish the tournament with a few strong wins, including a good one against the Scots, which they managed to dig out, 3-point win, and obviously that good win against England, there was a feeling of positivity. There was a feeling that the game against England was probably the first time under Andy Farrell that the whole thing came together. You saw set piece strike moves, you saw that forward dominance that we had been seeing, and it was married with a much better offense and a much better tempo and rhythm to Ireland's play. So I think there was a sort of a temperate positivity coming out of that game, but obviously that's been, spearheaded now by the summer and November series, which went so well.
Yeah, the November series especially was quite exceptional. Again, a big win against Japan, and at the time Japan had, I think, a week before played against Australia and had pushed them really close. And everyone knows that when Japan play, they like to play this fast attacking style of rugby. And we spoke before those games, said there always a potential banana skin, but to go and smash them 60 points to 5 was pretty impressive.
Oh, for sure. And it was all across those games. I mean, actually, I was looking at the 8-game win streak that Ireland are on since that defeat to France in Dublin last year. They're averaging 45 points a game. It's extraordinary, the numbers they've been rattling up, and they have this. They have arrived at this wonderful offense now, which kind of leans on 3 factors, mainly the footballing ability of the forwards, which they do trust, getting those guys on the ball, putting the likes of Conan and Tyke Byrne and Jack Conan in pivot positions, linking off one another and picking sharp lines. Then the tempo that Jamison Gibson Park gives the team, I think, is just much better than anything that we've had in recent years. Just getting clearing rucks quickly and finding and servicing the offense, allowing Ireland to generate quick ball and stretch defences. And then finally, the key point of Sexton being in there, just manipulating defences and putting guys in the right channels, making the killer passes, guiding and leading the offense. I think that the marriage of those 3 factors has been wonderful to see. And the Japan game was great in the sense that it was the first time that the back line really got moving. I mean, there were still those forwards in those pivot positions, but I think in the Japan game, all of the tries, and Ireland put 60 up on Japan, were scored by backs. And then in the Argentina game, which came the week after the All Blacks, I think they scored 53 points, and all of those tries were scored by forwards. So there's a wonderful balance to Ireland's attack. They're attacking from everywhere at the moment. They're attacking from in their own half, trying to move the ball, trying to stretch defenses back in their skill set. And it's paying off at the moment. I haven't seen them stopped so far. So it's been tremendously encouraging.
Yeah, and obviously the big game was the New Zealand game, and we were half joking, weren't we, when we were previewing the autumn that, oh, maybe they could do it, but who knows, they could maybe do it. And New Zealand coming into the autumn in quite incredible form, really, the way they were playing, the fact that they were, throwing the ball about so beautifully. They came to the Principality, yes, against a weaker Wales side, but blew us away that weekend. How much confidence do you think that performance would have given New Zealand? Would have given Ireland, definitely not New Zealand.
Yeah, it wouldn't have given them much.
Would have given the Irish team, because you've been the All Blacks a few times now over the last few years. So something sadly I can't say as a Welshman.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, I was actually got to be at that game. That was my first time seeing it. That was a real bucket list moment for me personally. Probably meant as much to me as it did to the team. To see them winning at home was just an amazing moment. I think they do take confidence from it. It's what's amazing was kind of how facile it was, in that sense that they just dominated everything. The All Blacks weren't ready. They weren't to the pitch of the game, and their forward pack got beaten up, and that was on both sides of the ball. The pressure defence stymied the All Blacks. They ended up kicking, and then on the offensive side, between Sexton and Gibson Park, and then the forwards, just seemingly every contact was won, every pass was finding a hole, and up until that final third, they were just blowing the All Blacks away. I think probably the most encouraging thing about that win was the fact that Ireland could have been, 2 or 3 scores clear at halftime and actually found themselves 5 points down. And in years gone by, when stuff like that has happened, Ireland have lost confidence. They've kind of become unsure of themselves. They maybe started to go back to a kick-heavy game, thinking that that things might not work for them. But to their credit, in this game, they stuck to their guns. They kept at it. They kept doing what they were doing. And eventually the holes just opened up, and Doris was able to walk in for a try, and they were able to get points on the board from which the All Blacks couldn't recover. So yeah, just the fact that they believed so thoroughly in the game plan and stuck with it when things weren't 100% going their way, and then found a win against a very good All Black side, was, I imagine, will give them major confidence. But I would qualify that with just being as good as the All Blacks were and are as a team. Nobody, since this rhythmic Irish offense has got going, has really been able to stop them. And I think the real test will come when that happens, when they are stymied. What's the plan B, and whether they can make the necessary adjustments and win the game when that inevitably happens, which didn't actually in that All Black game.
Yeah, I thought it was really fascinating over the autumn to see the change in style. I felt there was a quite a big shift, wasn't there, from the Six Nations, where really it was pretty one-dimensional, the attack, the different options were very one-dimensional. And then, all of a sudden we see this completely different way of playing against Japan. I was just so amazed at the way the Irish side were playing. And although, yes, it's Japan are still a very good side and can give tier 1 nations, as Ireland know and Scotland know, a really good challenge. Were you surprised at the change in style, or do you think it's something that's slowly been building up, maybe even from the provinces?
Yeah, in hindsight, I think you have to say it was slowly building up. I think you saw it coming together mostly in that England game at the tail end of the Six Nations. But I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't surprised. Like, coming into that tour, I didn't really know what to expect. It had been sort of an up and down couple of years from Andy Farrell. We were confident that we were getting things right at set piece, but a little worried about the attack and the defence, and whether, that those two key elements were going to come together at all. But no, as soon as they took the field, it was totally refreshing to see just that the trust that they had in the talent, the talent that we know these guys have. If you put Furlong on the ball with a Conan to his left and a Tadhg Byrne to his right, good things are going to happen. And that basically is the premise of what this Irish team are doing. There was very little pivot going on in the centres. It's different to what England or Wales or even Scotland might do, where those teams often rely on like one killer wide pass, which is going to take out the 13. That's not really what Ireland are about. They're about getting Sexton on the ball with options either side, a few different forward runners that he can hit. He's going to hit the preferable option. That guy's going to win his contact. If he does, he's going to have a man on his shoulder. That guy's going to go through a hole. And the forwards are really the key men. And often Robbie Henshaw and Gary Ringrose can be relegated to hitting rucks in those sequences. But it's been joyous to watch. It did take me by surprise, but I've been thoroughly enjoying it ever since. And I have seen real similarities, obviously, between how Ireland are trying to attack and how Leinster are trying to attack. It's very similar. When Sexton and the main guys are there, it has a very similar look to it.
Let's have a look at the squad, because the squad was announced a little bit ago. We're not going to go through every single name because we'll be here forever. But once again, there are a few players who could earn some first caps. There's one name, I'm going to be totally honest, I have no idea who this guy is. Could you tell us a little bit about Cian Prendergast?
Sure. I mean, it's important to note that he's in the development squad, so he's not. He's probably not going to feature, but he's a back rower for Connacht who has been more or less their number one sort of workhorse as far as output is concerned. Has been near enough man of the match in a number of occasions. He's kind of a lanky, long-haired chap, and he has some quality in terms of defense and offense. He's kind of one of those output back rowers who.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye out on him. The other ones, of course, are Matt Hansen, Aussie-born, playing at Connacht. He had a really exciting and blistering start to the season. Maybe he's tailed off a little bit, isn't quite at the levels that he's shown. And then, of course, we got Mike Lowry playing at fullback for Ulster. Although he's quite a small guy, he certainly puts his body in the line, and Ulster have been brilliant in Europe and in the URC.
I personally think, and this probably will ruffle some feathers, but I personally don't really know what Conor Murray is doing in the squad. I mean, I would hope to be proven wrong, but at the moment, I just think he's really, really struggling. He's struggling to generate the kind of tempo that Ireland want and need at test level. And every time, like, you can see that he knows the right thing to do is to kind of speed things up in moments. But a lot of the time when he tries to play with the kind of tempo that a Gibson Park gives you, or even a Craig Casey gives you, he kind of makes mistakes. And when you compare his form at the moment to what Kieran Marmion has been doing in Connacht, which is really solid, kind of what Ireland are looking for at the moment, I think they might have missed a trick there. And I think if Ireland are to come unstuck in the Six Nations, you might get to a period where, you know, Sexton is leaving the field and Gibson Park is leaving the field at 60 minutes and the game is in the balance, and Murray and Carberry come in, and it could not work. It could get slow. It could get more kick heavy. And then all of a sudden the Irish offense that has been in such flow could come unstuck. And that's a slight concern for me, is Murray in there. But by and large, I think I'm happy with the squad. But Larry, who you were talking about there, I'm very excited about. I think he reads the game really well. I love his approach. I love the speed that he brings, the versatility that he brings. And I love him as an option to bring off a bench if you need to add something, some flair, if you need to go and win a game. Mike Lowry could be a difference maker off the bench. He's got elite speed. He's also got a lovely pass on him. He can play 10, so he can come in as a second distributor. If you're struggling to gain access to the wide channels, he can really help out the back three there. So Lowry, I would not be surprised one bit to see Lowry involved.
The other name, obviously, from Ulster that I've been so impressed with this season is James Hume. I love his arrogance on the field as well. I think he's fantastic, quite young as well. I think he's about 23. Obviously, he's not going to be taking the place of a Henshaw or Ringrose. Why don't I think of Rob Shaw? He's English. But he's not going to be taking the place of any of them guys in this competition, really. But someone off the bench, he is a brilliant option. You mentioned about Conor Murray, and it's a difficult one with Conor Murray because he's been around for what feels like forever. And he obviously was very, very good, had a big dip. You felt like he came back and started to get back towards his best and yet another dip. That battle for 9, you've obviously, Gibson Park is pretty much nailed down to start, you'd think. But my question then would be, with Conor Murray, if he's not starting, does he truly offer anything off the bench? Would you be thinking that Craig Casey off the bench would be the better option?
Yeah, personally, I kind of think so. I'm not totally sold on Craig Casey either, but I fear for the tempo deficit that comes on. And listen, that's not to say that Murray can't do that. We know how good Murray can be. And to be fair to him, like the game against England last year, he started at 9 and was excellent and was a good facilitator of good attacking rugby. It's just that it's become less frequent, and I've seen in moments him either slow down, and it's a bit like Luke McGrath and Leinster sometimes, and the reason that he's fallen away is that he has to slow down to make sure that he can execute the skills, because when you're trying to pass at speed, it's just a really high tariff skill, and at the moment Murray's kind of lacking in that area. But what I think doesn't matter nearly as much as what Andy Farrell thinks, and I would be sure as sure can be that come test week, Conor Murray will be in the 23. It'll probably be Gibson Park and Murray. I would be very, very surprised if Murray's not in the starting 23 that Farrell picks, because he trusts him, because he's been there for so long, and I'm not sure if he totally trusts Casey.
If we go on to look at the fixtures, I'm not going to lie, I am shitting myself about the first game on Saturday. We, the Welsh, travel over to the Aviva, our 2:45 kickoff. Going into that game, I assume you're pretty confident going into that one. And what will be the game plan from Ireland, do you think?
You gotta love how the Welsh always manage to talk themselves down. I mean, who's reigning champions here? Which team is it that's won 6 of the last 18 Six Nations and 2 of the last 3? It's not Ireland. It's Wales. I mean, time and time again, Ireland have come to these games against Wales with explosive forward packs. Like you think of the iconic one really of the last decade that stings in the mind is the 2011 World Cup quarterfinal, and Ireland came rocking up. They just beaten Australia. Here they had this back row of Stephen Ferris and Jamie Heaslip and Sean O'Brien, and they were just going to run over this Welsh team. And what happened? The Welsh team outsmarted them. They forced them on the inside. They chop tackled them and they poached them. And they got Ireland doubting themselves, and they completely shut down the forward-based offense with their great defense. They're posting videos again of themselves doing their altitude training. They truly believe that they're fit and firing and can outwork any team. And so I don't know how confident I am. I think obviously if Ireland can maintain the flow and rhythm that they've had, they're going to be very, very hard to stop. And that's going to be the key point that Wales have to stop. Scrum, you've got Thomas Francis in there as a tight-headed Wyn Jones, very wily scrummagers. So if they can negate what Ireland do at scrum time, if Adam Beard can get after Ireland in the maul and at the line out, if those back rows can stop them, then all of a sudden it becomes a game of moments. And Wales are a great team at seizing the moments. If you look at the back line, the list of backs that they have, I'm not sure if there's a weak player in them. Guys like Halaholo and Tompkins, Josh Adams and Rhys Sammet with Liam Williams or even Johnny McNichol to feature. These guys will take tries from anywhere, and that's what Wales do so well, is they can turn the game into a slow, methodical, kicking style game, and then in strike. And they will be much better than Ireland at striking. And it's important to remember as well that Ireland's defence has leaked tries. It leaked tries in that All Blacks game, despite them dominating that game. They just fell asleep off one line out and bam, Papali'i was through and there was an All Blacks try. They were caught a little bit on the hop in the wide channels, bam, Will Jordan cuts them apart, because they never look worse really, Ireland, than when they're on the turn, when little kicks come in behind them, when there's little balls in space, then the kind of the speed deficit that they have in the wide channels can show. And Wales are primed to take advantage of those moments with the likes of Rhys Sammet. If they can get him into a little bit of space, linking with Liam Williams, they very often can be the most clinical team in the competition. So I'm not overwhelmed with confidence. I have confidence. I think they're a very good team. I think if we can get on top of Wales in the forward pack and own the ball and start getting that rhythmic offense going, we could put up a very good performance, own the ball and start putting tries together and win the game comfortably. But if Wales can disrupt us and it becomes a tight game, I don't know if I back us to win that game.
Next up, though, you head over to France, to the Stade de France, to take on France. And we'd assume that France would have beaten Italy on the opening weekend and would have beaten them pretty comfortably. Dupont as captain now for France, which is a big call, but an exciting one as well. France obviously play this extremely jouet kind of style, don't they? They just want to throw it about, enjoy it. Again, what would be the approach to this game, do you think? Or actually, do you think the approach would change depending on the results against Wales? Or do you think the game plan would stay the same?
I suppose it depends on the manner of the defeat. If we lose to Wales and we get badly exposed, naturally you're going to make some adjustments. The French game in Paris is probably it's the first of 5 big away days that will define Ireland's season. It's easy to look back at the last 8 games and the 45 points on average and all of that great stuff that Ireland have done, but you can't forget that 6 of those 8 games were at home. The 2 that were away, one was an Italian game, you kind of write that off. The other one was a Scottish game in Edinburgh that they won by just 3 points. So the exact performances for Ireland have all come in the Aviva Stadium in Dublin. This year they've got to go to Paris, then they've got to go to Twickenham, and then in the summer they've got 3 games down in New Zealand, 2 in Auckland and 1 in Wellington. Those are 5 games. So easy to see them going 0-5 in those games. but those are the 5 games that'll define the season. And if they can get some big wins there, that would be huge for them, because the World Cup isn't going to be played in the Aviva Stadium, unfortunately. So Ireland are going to have to learn how to perform as they have been performing in the Aviva Stadium away from home. And I think that'll be the key point of focus for that game in France, like not to adjust too much, to try and play their own offensive game. But I think primarily when you're looking at that game, like there are some points of concern. Like France have found it very easy to open Ireland up in recent years. Really, in the Galtier era, they've got to the edge, they've got outside the 13 channel and just found tries, and they've done it pretty much willfully, even with very little ball. So there's the key adjustments that Ireland have to make. First of all, they're going to have to do a much better job of shutting down for the access that the French get to the outside channels. That's where a guy like James Hume, you'd be seriously tempted. He's defended so well for Ulster in recent weeks. But even Henshaw defending that 13 channel, they're going to have a big job. And then the other area, of course, is just that forward battle, which is just insane. The quality on both sides, very hard to see who's going to come out on top. They've French with the likes of Mo Vaca and all of these big men that they can bring in, Willemse and Taufi Fanua. They just tend not to go backwards. And Ireland, obviously, with many of the stars that we've been talking about. But yeah, the decisive battle in that game will be at scrum time, at line-out time, and crucially in that collision zone. If Ireland can get on top of the French there, they're going to be a chance in Paris. If they can't, they aren't.
Next up, though, back to the Aviva against the Italians. We'd assume with this game that, well, I think everyone accepts that Ireland are going to win this game, but do you think there'd be rotation in this game, or would it depend on previous results, do you think?
Yeah, I imagine they'll give some guys in the squad a go. I like the way that the competition from an Ireland point of view. I think it's nice when you get Italy in that middle game, because basically you have 2 big blocks. Then obviously you got 4 huge games which are all winnable and all losable at the same time, and then you've got the Italy game, and that's true for everybody. But having Italy in that middle gap week, when you've got a gap week either side, basically just condenses the tournament into 2 blocks, 2 intense blocks of 2 games. So you start with Wales and France, and then you end with Scotland and England. And the Italy game in the middle, it's a chance to, it doesn't matter majorly what they do with it. I imagine they'll have kind of a World Cup in mind. Obviously they'll have to be mindful to see how Italy go, if they're going to be in any way competitive against the teams that they're playing in the opening 2 rounds. But with the depth that Ireland have, I imagine they're going to want to take a look at some guys like your Nick Timoney's and guys who may not have necessarily got minutes in the first few games. Craig Casey, for example, might start at 9. I wouldn't see much harm in doing that. And then you could probably have some of the senior figures on the bench to bring on if Italy are making a tough game of it. But especially considering it's at home, I would imagine with a World Cup in mind in 18 months' time as well, that they'll likely rotate the squad game, probably pretty majorly.
But it's going to be interesting to see what Italy bring this year. But you would expect the Irish side to get a very comfortable win here. Bonus point would be the minimum expectation. Next up, though, not such an easy game. Heading over to Twickenham, take on England.
And we'll try to do so again. I'm more concerned about what England are doing. I mean, I think that they, like, it's potentially fallen quite nicely for them in that people are kind of writing them off. They've obviously had all of these injury disruptions. Owen Farrell, who Eddie Jones was bigging up as going to be a leader in the team, now he's gone, and they're kind of unsure as to what they're doing. Eddie Jones, one of his earlier quotes that I did hear from him was talking about how this is his 3rd team. Like, he's had 3 teams now, and since he's been in charge of England, he had the team that he took on from the last World Cup. Then after the 2018 season, he built a new team that went to the World Cup final. He says last year that team died, and now he's building a 3rd team, which will go to next year's World Cup. And it's an interesting take. He reckons the kind of each team, as he puts it, has a shelf life of 3 years. But the fact that they have this new talent basically to throw in there, I just think it could come to life. I think they're such impressive players. And Freddie Stewart, combining with Henry Slade, who's a lovely attacking footballer as well, and then Dombrandt up front in the pack. Like, these guys are very, very explosive, and they have the potential to be just a really dazzling kind of attacking team. Marcus Smith, a guy in the mold of Finn Russell, with a really great clutch as well. I mean, you talking about like your NFL quarterback in the 4th quarter, the way he digs out these results with no time on the clock. Really, really rate his temperament. Think he could easily be the best player in the world in a year's time, and England could come to life with him at 10. The game against South Africa last November, I think, was very, 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 very interesting for a number of reasons, not least of which was the fact that they got blown away up front, which like to see an England team get blown away so decisively in the tight five area. First of all, you never see it happen. It was extraordinary stuff from the Springboks. They are an extraordinary forward unit. But to see England then go on and win that game, that's amazing. English teams have always relied on forward dominance to be successful in games. To see them lose that battle decisively, give up a load of penalties, a load of meters, never really get a foothold, and still manage to dig out the win because they took tries as soon as they were there. They launched off set piece. They found the wide channels. They trusted the skill set of their players. They played with an explosive rhythmic tempo that the Springboks couldn't deal with, and they opened them up 3 times. I mean, I was very, very impressed. And I think if England can be that kind of team, the sky's the limit for them, because in many games they won't have to dig out games that they'll lose the forward battle in. They'll win the forward battle, and they still have a lot of real quality in the tight five. So if they can marry the attacking quality that they have in the back line with the physicality that we know they have up front, they're going to be very, very tough to beat. So that, it's a little down the tracks to know what the dynamics of that game will be exactly. We'll have to get a look at this England team and what they actually look like on the field. But even looking at it from this point, going to Twickenham and win could be one of the tougher tasks in World Rugby, even come that game in early March.
Yeah, it seems like the English team have been going through a transitional phase with bringing the likes of Marcus Smith in, Freddie Stewart in, and then letting some of the older players go. Owen Farrell, of course, is out for the competition, so he's not going to be involved. Johnny May potentially is out for the whole competition as well. So there are some spots in that England team that could be filled. And when you got someone like George Ford, who's been playing so well, you got Marcus Smith, who's been playing so well. I'm a huge fan of someone like a Rafi Quirk, who can speed the game up as well. I think they've got a very solid squad. Yeah, and I think the Six Nations this year is going to be really exciting, because I truly believe that 5 teams could win it this year.
For sure.
I'd probably say that 4 set teams are more likely to win it. I'm just kind of putting Wales down so that not too much
the champions, I might add, the champions you're writing off here.
But I truly believe that the competition is pretty wide open, and I do think we're going to see some really good rugby. But finally, you welcome Scotland for the Grand Slam at the end. You welcome Scotland to the Aviva on the final weekend.
And one of the key things that Ireland have been able to do really since the Joe Schmidt era, and it's carried over even if you look at last year's game, is they kind of like to just play Schmidt ball against Scotland, which is just make sure that you hold the ball and resource the rucks. What Scotland are so great at, and you've got guys like Darge coming into the squad now who will even add to that, but they have this wonderful jackling ability in defence, and they really do lean on that. They want to turn the ball over. And if Ireland and the Springboks are teams who just play keep ball, like we're going to protect our ball at all costs and rack up the phases in the red zone and back ourselves to break you down ultimately with physicality. And Scotland really haven't had an answer to that style of red zone play. Ireland have protected the ball against them really well and just not allowed them to get in and steal the ball and scored those inevitable tries that they can do, that other teams like Wales have been able to stop Ireland from doing with chopped tackles and a bit of aggression. Ireland can often look impotent against the Welsh when they're doing that slow, methodical Schmidt ball rugby. But against the Scots, it's just worked and continued to work. I think the Scots, I think they need to come up with an answer for it and fast. But on paper, I mean, I do think they're a great squad. I think they're arguably the most balanced squad in the whole Six Nations. They've got like a really strong, solid tight five, good options in there. They've got a wonderful balance in their backline between offense and defense. Like they've got guys who can, obviously, in Finn Russell, who can make explosive attacking plays, who reads the game so well. And Stuart Hogg has that, first of all, the offensive instincts, which you all know about, as well as a cannon boot, that long spiral, which has just won them the territory battle in every game they've played in the last year. And then in Chris Harris, you have a really, really smart outside defender who can shut down plays. Probably the best defender from 13, maybe Henshaw and him would be the two in the tournament who are the best at defending that position. But the balance of that team, there really aren't many weaknesses. They have a strong set piece, they have a strong ball, they have a strong defense, they have a strong attack, and they have a strong kicking game. And yet in key moments and key games, they kind of can let things slip or fall by the wayside. And they've had those issues matching up against a team that plays keep ball and resources that works really well. So those are the key work-ons for Scotland. But I wouldn't underestimate them. I think they are a real chance. but I do feel like it's a pivotal year for them.
Finally, what do you think are what do you think are the Irish rugby fans' expectations for this season? Because obviously coming off such a successful autumn, what do you think are the expectations this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly speaking, we want to win the tournament. I mean, that's, there's no expectation of a Grand Slam or Triple Crowns or any of that stuff. I mean, it's just this is an absolute slog of a tournament with 5 class teams in it. The winner is going to have really earned it, and Ireland see themselves as in a position to win the tournament. You forget that, like, as good as wins against the All Blacks are, there's still no silverware under Andy Farrell, and that's a key thing coming into a World Cup, is to get your hands on some silverware. So I think broadly speaking, the expectation, the hope at least, is to win the tournament. But the key expectation and the key thing that has to be met, I think above all else, is to not regress. Is like they've played really, really well over the last 8 games, over the last 9 months. They've come on leaps and bounds. Just to not take a step back into becoming that kind of shell of a team that you can see when they lose confidence in themselves, when they stop backing their attack.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to put you on the spot. What are your predictions for the Six Nations from bottom to top?
All of the clarity of thought that being a fan can give you, I'll go for Ireland to win it. Sure, why not? We'll say we nick one of the games in Paris or Twickenham, and I think it'll be a 4-win team that takes the title this year. I just think the teams are so strong. I'd be very surprised if anybody did a Grand Slam. So we'll say Ireland just ahead of France, just ahead of England, and then Scotland, and then Wales, and then Wales. And like I've picked them up in this podcast, in this chat, but I do think that because of the injuries that they have, if they are to take a bad loss this week, it could kind of snowball on them. And when they aren't that confident, bullish Welsh team that are in contention, they can look a little tame and can be kind of opened up. And this might be a bit of a fallow year for Wales, probably because of that injury count. So I'll put them fifth for now. But bear in mind, there's so little between those top 5 teams. And unsurprisingly, I'll have Italy at the bottom, because they are a tier 2 team and a tier 1 comp, unfortunately for them.
I thought you were for 1 second going to put Wales at the bottom, and I was about to kick you off. But we're all good. We're all good.
Oh, I'll be eating my words come next week. You'll be grinning ear to ear when Wales come away. When we get a red card for Johnny Sexton after 2 minutes.
I've already had the messages through about, Wales going to win a game this Six Nations without having an extra man on the field, all of that kind of stuff. Finally, where can people find out about Overlap Rugby? Tell us a bit about it, and what are you doing over the Six Nations?
Sure. So we're going to have one sort of big show every week, which we're going to break up into a few other videos. We're going to be going in depth on all the Six Nations games, previewing all of them. We're also going to be looking at some of the tier 2 stuff, the World Cup qualifiers going on in Rugby Europe as well. And we're going to post one major podcast a week, which I think we'll try and post every Wednesday. And that'll be on youtube.com/Overlap Rugby podcast, or just search Overlap Rugby on YouTube and you'll get us there.
So there we go. That is the preview for Ireland ahead of the Six Nations 2022. Thank you very much to Darragh for jumping on. Massively appreciated. Check out what the guys at the Overlap Rugby podcast are doing. Link in the description down below. If you have enjoyed this, hit the like button, subscribe as well, and let me know your predictions for how you think the Six Nations is going to go this year. And of course, we still have previews for Italy, France, and Wales to come this week ahead of the weekend. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon here on BS Rugby.